Close your eyes for a second, then imagine opening them in a completely dark room. Not dim, not shadowy. Actually dark, the kind where you can't see your own hand in front of your face. For most people, something shifts almost immediately. Heart rate ticks up. Muscles tense. Every small sound suddenly demands attention. This happens even in your own home, even when you know, logically, that nothing has changed except the amount of light in the room. Fear of the dark is one of the most common fears on the planet, and also one of the strangest, because darkness itself isn't dangerous. It's an absence. Nothing is attacking you. Nothing has touched you. And yet the fear is real, physical, and remarkably consistent across cultures, ages, and individual life experiences. So what's actually going on? It turns out there isn't one single answer. There are at least 5 separate, overlapping reasons, each backed by real research, each explaining a different piece of why the dark gets under our skin. Start with the most obvious one. Biology never really updated the software. Human eyes are mediocre in low light. Our night vision is far worse than most of the predators that hunted our ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years. Big cats, wolves, other nocturnal hunters, all built with vision, hearing, and smell optimized for exactly the conditions that leave humans nearly blind. For most of our evolutionary history, being caught outside, exposed after dark, carried a real and immediate risk of being killed and eaten. That risk didn't apply equally throughout the day. It spiked specifically at night. Evolutionary biologists argue that a nervous system tuned to treat darkness as inherently higher risk would have had a genuine survival advantage, and would have been passed down generation after generation long after streetlights and locked doors made the actual risk mostly disappear. In other words, your unease in a dark room isn't irrational. It's an ancient risk calculation, still quietly running, using assumptions that stopped being accurate thousands of years ago. The second reason has less to do with predators, and more to do with how human perception itself is built. Vision is, by a wide margin, the dominant human sense. The majority of the brain's sensory processing is devoted to visual information. When the lights go out, you don't just lose the ability to see potential threats. You lose your primary tool for understanding your environment at all. Every other sense has to compensate: hearing, touch, a rough mental map built from memory, and none of them are nearly as fast or as detailed as sight. Researchers studying sensory deprivation have found that this loss of visual input on its own, independent of any actual danger, reliably increases measured anxiety and vigilance. Your brain isn't just worried about what might be out there. It's unsettled by not having its best tool available to check. Third, the dark doesn't just remove information. It actively distorts what little information remains. Humans have a well-documented tendency called pareidolia, the brain's habit of finding familiar patterns, especially faces, in random or ambiguous visual noise. It's why clouds look like animals, why a power outlet can look like a startled face, why the front of a car can look like it's smiling. In good lighting, pareidolia is mostly harmless, a fun quirk of perception. In low light, it becomes something else entirely. With less visual detail available, the brain has to fill in far more gaps than usual, and it fills them in using its most sensitive pattern library: threat-relevant shapes, specifically human or animal-like silhouettes, a coat on a hook, a shadow cast by a curtain, a pile of laundry in the corner of a dark bedroom. In daylight, these are obviously mundane. In darkness, for a fraction of a second, your brain will often flag them as something that might be watching you. That flash of dread you feel before your rational brain catches up and corrects the mistake, that's pareidolia, actively misfiring in exactly the conditions where it's most likely to misfire. Fourth, and this is the part backed by some of the most direct experimental evidence, darkness doesn't just change what you perceive, it measurably changes your nervous system's baseline reactivity. In 1997, researcher Christian Greon and colleagues published a study in the journal Biological Psychiatry testing something specific: the human startle reflex, the automatic, involuntary flinch triggered by a sudden loud noise. They measured that reflex in both lit and dark conditions. The finding, the startle response, was measurably stronger in darkness, even with the exact same sudden noise, even with no actual threat present at all. Participants literally flinched harder in the dark for no reason other than the absence of light itself. And there was a second finding, arguably even more interesting. The size of that increased startle response correlated with how afraid of the dark each participant remembered being as a child. People who'd been more fearful of the dark growing up showed a measurably larger jump in reflex intensity as adults, even decades later. This suggests something important. Fear of the dark isn't purely psychological, a story you tell yourself. It's wired into a measurable physical reflex, one that can apparently be calibrated early in life and then persist quietly into adulthood. Which leads directly into the fifth reason. For most people, fear of the dark isn't something that develops in adulthood. It's something that never fully disappears from childhood. Developmental psychologists have documented fear of the dark as one of the most common, near-universal childhood fears, typically emerging around age 2 and often peaking somewhere between ages 4 and 6. At that age, the fear usually isn't abstract. Children this age are still developing the ability to fully distinguish imagination from reality, which is exactly why monsters under the bed feel like a real, immediate threat rather than a silly idea. For most children, this fear gradually fades as the brain's reasoning abilities mature. And, as repeated, safe exposure to darkness teaches the nervous system that nothing bad actually happens. But it rarely disappears completely. For a significant number of adults, a milder version persists quietly for life. A preference for a hallway light left on, a moment of hesitation before entering a dark room, a heightened alertness walking to a car at night. Researchers studying adult nyctophobia generally frame it less as a completely new fear appearing in adulthood, and more as an old one that was simply never fully unlearned. So layer all 5 of these together, and the fear stops looking irrational at all. None of these 5 reasons work alone. They stack, each one making the others slightly more convincing to a brain that's just trying to keep you alive.